I understand the charges, Your Honor, but if you just let me explain, it wasn't intentional. It was a misunderstanding, really. I just need you to see the whole picture.
You know, after nearly 40 years on this bench, I thought I had seen the full spectrum of human darkness. I've looked into the eyes of violent offenders, desperate thieves, and broken families. But on that overcast Monday morning, a 4-year-old man walked into my courtroom, not in an orange jumpsuit, but in a $5,000 designer suit. And what he told me about why he systematically wiped out the life savings of thousands of elderly citizens. It made me question the very soul of the digital age we are living in. When I looked him in the eye and asked the one question, every victim in the back of the room was screaming in their hearts when I said, "Was it worth it?" His answer was so cold, so devoid of any human empathy, that it left the entire courtroom in a stunned, suffocating silence. But before I tell you exactly what he said, before I show you how this influencer turned the hard-earned trust of our seniors into a digital piggy bank for his luxury lifestyle, I need you to stop right now and hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to share with you, this story of how a crypto genius preyed on the most vulnerable among us, is a warning that every parent, every grandparent, and every child needs to hear. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you believe social media is creating a generation of monsters who value likes more than human lives? Is the pursuit of easy wealth destroying our basic sense of right and wrong? I read every single one of your comments, and I need to know if you see the same moral decay that I see from this bench every day. I have been a judge long enough to see technology change the way we hurt one another. My father taught me that our elders are the backbone of society. They are to be protected, not exploited. In my early days, a scammer had to look you in the eye to steal from you. Today, they use a ring light, a charismatic smile, and a crypto buzzword to rob a grandmother in Ohio of her dignity while they sit in a penthouse in Miami. My clerk, Sarah, placed the file on my desk. The defendant was Julian Vance, 24 years old, a financial guru with 3 million followers. He didn't use a gun, he used an algorithm. And the damage he left behind wasn't just financial, it was the total destruction of the peace and security these seniors had worked 50 years to build. The courtroom was heavy that morning. You could almost taste the grief in the air. I looked past the expensive mahogany tables of the defense and straight into the third row of the gallery. That's where I saw Mrs. Gladys Higgins. She's 82 years old. As a judge, I've learned to read faces like maps. And Gladys's face was a roadmap of a life well lived, but recently devastated. I saw the deep, weathered lines on her forehead. Those weren't just the marks of time. They were the physical manifestation of a year spent in terror, wondering if she'd be evicted from the home she's lived in for 50 years. I looked at her hands. They were trembling as she clutched a worn-out leather purse. And then I looked at Julian Vance. Julian sat there with a posture of practiced confidence. He had that influencer glow, perfectly groomed hair, skin that had clearly never seen a day of hard labor, and a look in his eyes that suggested he was just waiting for this inconvenience to be over so he could get back to his followers. He looked at these seniors not as people, but as exit liquidity. "Mr. Vance," I said, leaning forward, "my clerk tells me you called your investment fund the Golden Shield. You told these people like Mrs. Higgins, that you were protecting them from inflation. You told them you were their digital grandson, looking out for their future. Is that correct?" He didn't even flinch. "I was providing an opportunity, Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "The market is volatile. Everyone knows the risks." Risk. That's the word they always use to hide behind. But this wasn't risk. This was a calculated harvest of human hope. You see, Julian didn't just post about charts and numbers. He went live every night at 7 p.m. right when most of these folks were finishing dinner, and he spoke directly into the camera. He used words like legacy, independence, and security. He knew exactly what he was doing. He tapped into the deepest fear of every American over the age of 70, the fear of becoming a burden to their children. He told them that by buying Vance coin, they could pay for their own long-term care. They could leave a massive inheritance for their grandkids, and they would never have to ask for a dime from anyone. He didn't sell them crypto. He sold them a shield against the indignity of poverty. And while they were clicking buy, believing they were securing their final years. Julian was using their retirement checks to lease a private jet for a weekend in Ibiza. If you're listening to this and you feel that knot of anger in your stomach, the same one I felt sitting on this bench, I want you to leave a comment right now. Tell me, have we become a society that prizes hustle over honor? When did stealing from the elderly become just another business model? I want to hear your stories. Have you or your parents ever been targeted by someone who looked trustworthy on a screen? I asked the prosecutor, Mr. Henderson, to show the court the promotional videos Julian had sent out via private Facebook groups specifically designed to filter for people over 60. What I saw on that screen wasn't just a marketing pitch. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Julian would sit in a cozy library setting, wearing a cardigan, looking more like a grandson than a CEO, and say, "Grandma, Grandpa, the banks are lying to you. They want to keep your money. I want to set you free." He wasn't just a thief. He was a wolf who had spent months learning how to bark like a sheep. And by the time the Golden Shield collapsed, he had drained $42 million from over 8,000 seniors. My clerk, Sarah, handed me a second folder. This one was thinner, but it carried the weight of 1,000 tragedies. It contained the digital forensic trail of Julian's Golden Shield fund. I looked at the data, but I didn't see numbers. I saw stolen vacations, canceled surgeries, and the quiet, desperate tears of people who had been left with nothing. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice echoing in the absolute silence of the court, "I'm looking at your transaction history. In June of last year, while you were posting videos from a yacht in Greece telling your family of investors to hold the line and buy the dip, you were secretly offloading $8 million worth of your own coin. You were the one selling while they were desperately buying. You didn't just let the ship sink. You were the one who drilled the holes in the hull." He shifted in his seat. For the first time, that perfectly practiced influencer mask slipped just a fraction. I saw a flicker of something, not guilt, but the look of a gambler who realized the house finally had the cards. "Your Honor," his lawyer interrupted. "My client was simply rebalancing his portfolio. It's a standard financial move." "Standard?" I fired back. "Tell that to Mr. Arthur Jenkins." I pointed to a man in the fourth row. "Arthur is 74. He spent 35 years working in a steel mill. He has the calloused hands of a man who knows what real work is, hands that Julian Vance has never had to possess." Arthur had invested his entire 401k into the Golden Shield because Julian told him it was unhackable and recession-proof. I want you to listen closely to how he did it, because this is the how that every scammer uses. Julian didn't use complex financial jargon. He used empathy. He would look into his camera and say, "I know you're tired of seeing the value of your dollar shrink. I know you're worried about the rising cost of healthcare. Don't let the system make you a burden to your kids. Take your power back." He weaponized their independence. He knew that for a veteran or a retired teacher, the most terrifying thought isn't death, it's having to ask their children for grocery money. He promised them a shield, but he gave them a trap. If you are watching this right now, and you've ever felt that pressure, that fear of the future, hit that like button to stand in solidarity with people like Arthur. And I want you to do something even more important. Share this video. Not for the views, but because there is an influencer out there right now, probably using these exact same words, trying to steal from your neighbor. We have to stop the algorithm from rewarding this predatory behavior. The prosecutor then played an audio clip. It wasn't a public video. It was a leaked voice memo Julian sent to his inner circle of promoters just days before the crash. His voice was different here. It wasn't warm. It wasn't the digital grandson. It was sharp, arrogant, and mocking. "The boomers are piling in," the recording played. "They think this is their ticket to the easy life. Keep the hype up for 48 more hours. Once we hit 50 mil, we pull the plug and vanish. By the time they figure out the website is down, we'll be in Dubai." The sound of that recording hitting the courtroom speakers was like a physical blow. I looked at the gallery. I saw people holding their heads in their hands. I saw the betrayal. Julian had turned their desire for a dignified old age into a joke for his inner circle. I turned back to Julian. "Mr. Vance, you said in your bio that you wanted to disrupt the world. Well, you certainly did that. You disrupted the lives of 8,000 families. You disrupted the peace of mind of people who earned their rest. Tell me, when you were recording that memo, did you think about the faces of the people you were talking about? Or were they just viewers to you? When that audio clip stopped playing, the courtroom didn't just go quiet, it went cold. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears, the kind that makes you realize you are standing in the presence of pure, unadulterated malice. I looked at the gallery of seniors, and for the first time in my career, I saw a collective expression that I can only describe as soul-crushing betrayal. I looked at Henry, a 9-year-old, retired firefighter, sitting in the second row. Henry has a jawline that looks like it was carved out of granite, a man who spent 40 years running into burning buildings while everyone else was running out. But as he sat there, listening to Julian Vance mock the boomers as easy prey, Henry's shoulders, which had stayed straight through decades of service, finally slumped. His eyes, usually sharp and alert, became hollow. This is what I call the physiognomy of despair. When a man who has lived a life of honor realizes he has been outplayed by a coward with a keyboard, the light in his eyes doesn't just dim, it goes out. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice low, but carrying the weight of the law. "Do you know why most of these people didn't come forward at first? Do you know why it took the FBI 6 months to build this case?" Julian looked at his lawyer, then back at me, saying nothing. "It's because of shame," I continued. "You didn't just steal their money, you stole their dignity. You knew that if a grandfather loses his house to a crypto scam, he won't tell his children. He won't tell his friends. He'll sit in the dark, eating canned soup, blaming himself for being stupid or out of touch. You banked on their silence. You relied on their pride to keep your secret safe." I turned to the camera, to the influencer world Julian represented. If you are watching this and you think Julian is an outlier, you are wrong. There is a whole industry of digital vultures trained to spot the independent streak in our seniors. They know our parents don't want to ask for help, and they use that independence as a weapon. If you're watching this right now, I want you to do me a favor. If you have a parent or a grandparent who is online, I want you to call them after this video. Don't lecture them, just tell them you love them. Tell them that if they ever see something that looks too good to be true, they can come to you without judgment. We have to break the cycle of shame that these predators thrive on. Hit that subscribe button if you're committed to protecting the people who raised us. We need to build a real shield, a shield of community and conversation. I looked back at the evidence. Among the files was a series of emails from a woman named Margaret. She was a retired school teacher from Maine. She had written to Julian dozens of times after the Golden Shield website went dark. Her emails started with confusion. "Julian, I can't log in. Is the system being upgraded?" Then they turned to worry. "Julian, I need to withdraw $500 for my medication. Please help." And finally, the last email, sent 3 days before she was evicted. "Julian, I treated you like my own grandson. Why won't you answer me?" Julian didn't answer her because he had already blocked her. He had cleared his notifications. To him, Margaret wasn't a school teacher with a heart condition. She was a conversion metric that had fulfilled its purpose. "Mr. Vance," I said, holding up Margaret's printed email, "you told your followers that you were disrupting the financial system. But look at this paper. You didn't disrupt a system. You disrupted a life. You disrupted a woman's right to age with peace. You took a lifetime of service and turned it into a down payment on a Lamborghini." Julian's defense attorney, a man whose smile looked like it had been purchased from the same high-end catalog as his client's suit, stood up slowly. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me as if he were explaining a complex weather pattern rather than a massacre of life savings. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with forced reason, "we must look at this in the context of the modern digital economy. Mr. Vance created a platform. He created a token. In the world of high-tech finance, projects fail, markets shift. While the optics are unfortunate, my client is a victim of a volatile market just as much as his investors. This was a business failure, not a criminal enterprise. The optics, that word is a favorite among those who have no conscience. They use it when they want to pretend that a tragedy is just a PR problem." I leaned over my bench, my eyes fixed on Julian, who was nodding slightly as his lawyer spoke. A business failure, Mr. Martinez? Let's talk about that. When a traditional business fails, the CEO doesn't usually buy a $1-2 million penthouse in Miami the same week. The customers lose their ability to buy groceries. When a business fails, the CEO doesn't block the phone numbers of the people who funded his vision. I looked back at Julian. He was tapping a manicured fingernail against the table. I saw the physiognomy of arrogance, the way his jaw remained loose, his eyes wandering toward the clock. He wasn't afraid of the law. He was bored by the little people in the room. Mr. Vance, I said, cutting off his lawyer, you're 24. You have 40, maybe 50 years of earning potential ahead of you. If you lose everything tomorrow, you have the most valuable asset in the world, time. But look at the people behind you. Look at Mr. Jenkins. Look at Gladys. They don't have 40 years to bounce back. For them, a market shift means the difference between a dignified retirement and a cold room in a state-run facility. You didn't just take their money. You stole their time. You stole the peace they spent half a century earning. I turned to the camera. To all of you watching this, there is a lie being sold to our youth today that as long as you make money, it doesn't matter who you stepped on to get it. That hustle justifies harm. But I want to tell you something. Wealth without honor is just a fancy way of being a parasite. If you agree that business is never an excuse for cruelty, I want you to hit that like button right now. And I have a question for you in the comments. Do you think the platforms, the ones that gave Julian the verified blue check mark and promoted his golden shield to your parents, should also be standing here in this courtroom? Should the companies that profit from the ads on these scams be held liable? I read every comment, and your voice matters in this fight for accountability. I reached for the file again. The state has provided evidence that Julian used a specific shadow algorithm, a piece of code designed to specifically target users who had searched for Social Security benefits or Medicare within the last 30 days. He didn't just cast a wide net. He used a digital sniper rifle to hit the people he knew were looking for security. I looked at Julian. You didn't want investors, Julian. You wanted victims. You wanted people who wouldn't understand the fine print. You wanted people who would trust your smile because you looked like someone they could be proud of. You used the grandson persona to bypass their natural defenses. Tell me, Mr. Vance, does the golden shield protect you from the sight of these people's tears? Or did you just edit those out of your life too? I decided it was time for the courtroom to hear a voice that didn't come through a filtered lens or a high-speed internet connection. I called Mrs. Gladys Higgins to the stand. She walked slowly, her small frame swallowed by the witness chair. Gladys is 82. She has the kind of face that reminds you of your own grandmother, soft, kind, with eyes that have seen the Great Depression and the moon landing. But today, those eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. As she sat there, I noticed her hands. They weren't just old. They were stained with the ink of dozens of ledger books where she had tried, night after night, to make the math work after Julian took her savings. This is what the influencer world calls collateral damage. I call it a crime against a lifetime. Mrs. Higgins, I said softly, could you tell the court what Julian Vance told you during that private Zoom call last December? She took a shaky breath, her voice barely a whisper. He told me he was doing this because he cared about the forgotten generation. He said the government didn't care about us, but he did. He said my $10,000, all I had left from my husband's life insurance, would become $50,000 by the spring. He said I wouldn't have to choose between my heat bill and my heart medication anymore. She paused, looking directly at Julian for the first time. Julian didn't look back. He was staring at the ceiling, looking annoyed, as if he were waiting for a slow-loading web page to refresh. And Julian, she continued, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp clarity, I believed you. I watched your videos every night. I felt like I knew you. I thought you were a good boy. When the money vanished, I didn't even get mad. I was just ashamed that I had been so foolish. You weren't foolish, Gladys, I intervened, my voice echoing through the chamber. You were targeted by a professional predator who spent millions on psychological profiling to find out exactly how to break your heart. I want everyone watching this to stop what you are doing. Look at the screen. If you feel the weight of what Gladys just said, if you realize that the person you follow on Instagram might be the same person destroying a life like hers, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment saying, "Justice for Gladys." We need to send a message to the algorithms that we value the dignity of our elders more than the clout of a criminal. Are we going to let these digital vultures continue to thrive, or are we going to demand accountability? I read every comment, and I want to see you standing with Gladys today. I turned back to Julian. "Mr. Vance, look at her. Look at Mrs. Higgins. She spent 40 years as a librarian. She helped thousands of children learn to read. She contributed to the world. What have you contributed, Julian? A golden shield that turned out to be a paper-thin lie. A series of photos of you in front of cars you don't even own?" Julian's lawyer stood up to object, but I waved him down. "No, Mr. Martinez, your client wanted an audience. He wanted millions of people to watch him. Well, he has an audience now. He has me. And he has the 8,000 people whose lives he turned into a failed business venture." I reached into the file and pulled out a photo. It was a picture of Julian's Golden Shield headquarters, which turned out to be nothing more than a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. You told Gladys you had a team of experts working around the clock to protect her money. But the truth is, the only person working was you working on your tan in the Mediterranean, while Gladys was selling her wedding ring to pay her property taxes. The courtroom was silent, but for the first time, I saw Julian flinch. His legs started to shake under the table. The physiognomy of fear was finally setting in. The realization that there is no delete button in a court of law was starting to hit him. The defense had rested. Julian's high-priced attorney sat down, looking like a man who had tried to polish a piece of coal and realized his hands were just getting dirty. I sat back in my chair and looked at Julian Vance. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the muffled sobs of a woman in the back. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air like a scalpel. "Throughout this trial, you have looked at your phone more than you have looked at the people in this room. You have checked your watch more than you have checked your conscience. You are 24 years old, and you have built a digital empire on the foundation of vanity. You wanted to be a leader, Julian. You wanted people to follow you." I stood up, leaning over the bench to look directly down at him. At this distance, the influencer glow was gone. I could see the physiognomy of a coward. His skin was pale, not from hard work, but from the sudden, cold realization that there is no exit button in this room. His eyes were darting toward the side door, looking for a way out that didn't exist. "I want you to turn around, Julian," I commanded. "Turn around and look at the followers you led into the wilderness. Look at Mr. Jenkins, whose hands are shaking because he can't afford his insulin. Look at Gladys, who is wearing a coat she bought 10 years ago because she can't afford a new one. These aren't users. These aren't data points. These are the people whose lives you traded for a blue checkmark and a leased penthouse." Julian turned, his movements stiff and robotic. He looked at the gallery for 3 seconds before his head dropped. For the first time, he couldn't maintain the CEO posture. His shoulders rounded. His ego, which had filled the room an hour ago, was shrinking by the second. "You asked your followers in one of your videos, 'Who wants to be a lion in a world of sheep?'" I reminded him. "Well, Julian, a lion hunts to survive. A lion protects his pride. You aren't a lion. You are a digital parasite. You found the most trusting, most honorable generation of Americans, and you drained them because you thought they were too slow to catch you. You thought your shadow algorithm made you invisible to the law." I turned to the camera, to the millions of you watching this story unfold. We are living in a dangerous era where viral fame has become a substitute for virtue. We have created a culture that rewards the hustle, even when the hustle is a heist. If you believe that we need to start valuing character over clout, I want you to hit that like button right now. Stand up for Gladys, stand up for the truth. And I want to ask you something important in the comments. If Julian is sentenced to prison, do you think his followers will even remember his name in 6 months? Or will they just move on to the next guru, promising them a shortcut to the top? I read every word you write, and I want to know if you think our society can survive this level of digital narcissism. I looked back at the file one last time. You made $6 million in personal commission from the Golden Shield collapse, Julian. $6 million of stolen peace. You told the FBI you lost the private keys to the offshore accounts. You think you're being clever. You think you can do a few years in a country club prison and come out to a hidden fortune. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder. Let me be very clear. By the time I am done with this sentencing, there won't be a penny left for you to hide. I am going to strip away every luxury you bought with Gladys's tears. I am going to turn your golden shield into a lead weight that will pull you down until you understand the true meaning of accountability. Mr. Vance, please stand. The sound of Julian's chair scraping against the floor felt like a thunderclap in the heavy silence. He stood there, his designer suit now wrinkled, his head bowed, finally stripped of the digital armor that had protected his ego for so long. I looked at him. Then I looked at the hundreds of seniors in my gallery, people who had given their lives to this country, only to have their peace stolen by a boy who wanted to be viral. Julian, I began, my voice steady and ironclad. You spent your youth chasing engagement metrics. You measured your worth in likes, comments, and offshore balances. You thought that because you were behind a screen, you were beyond the reach of justice. But today, the algorithm has failed you. Today, you are faced with a reality that cannot be edited or deleted. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. It is the judgment of this court that you are sentenced to 15 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate seizure of every asset currently in your name, the cars, the penthouse, the watches. Every cent recovered will be placed into a restitution fund for the victims of the Golden Shield. And lastly, you are permanently banned from every social media platform for the rest of your natural life. You wanted to be seen, Julian? Now you will be forgotten. Julian's knees buckled. He didn't say a word as the bailiff stepped forward. But as he was led toward the side door, I saw Gladys Higgins stand up. She didn't shout. She didn't cheer. She simply watched him go, a small, tired smile of relief touching her lips. For her, it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that, for once, the world saw her. For once, the forgotten generation was the only one that mattered. I turned my gaze directly to the camera, to all of you who have stayed with me through this journey. We are at a crossroads in our society. We have built tools that can connect the world, but we have handed them to people who only want to exploit it. We have taught our children how to get views, but we forgot to teach them how to have a soul. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the people in your life who need your protection, I am asking you one last time to hit that subscribe button. Join this community of accountability, and please, take the lesson Julian Vance learned too late. 1 million likes mean nothing if you have no one who truly loves you. 1 year has passed since that day. Julian is serving his time in a cell that has no Wi-Fi and no audience. Gladys Higgins was able to stay in her home thanks to the restitution fund. She calls my office every month just to say hello. She told me recently that she finally stopped looking at her phone and started looking at her garden again. Real life, she told me, is much more beautiful when it's not through a screen. Make good choices. Protect your family. And remember, your value is not found in a follow count, but in the lives you touch with honesty and grace. I am Judge Boyd. Thank you for listening. Put down your phones. Go hug your parents. God bless.